Hi, good evening, everyone. Um, One thing I will say, first of all, congratulations and well done to all of you for being here this evening. I don't know what stage, of your careers you are, but the fact that in the middle of a global pandemic, you've taken the time to join us on this platform, shows that you are well invested in your career and, well interested in developing your career. And, it's very commendable. And so I'll say, well done and, keep going, keep pushing. Um, on to the right of your screen, there is a chat box. I want you to do me a favor. Just within that chat box, I want, most of you or all of you to actually just, quickly note down where you are in your life. Some of you may be just graduating from university. Some of you may be just finishing GCSEs, or some of you may be finishing your A levels. Just, quickly in that, chat box, you're right. Just quickly let me know where you are, what stage of life you are in. Okay, it's coming in. Okay, thank you. I can see most of you are either, finishing off your undergraduate degrees or doing or finishing your master's degrees. So, it helps me know how to tailor the next couple of minutes. Let me start by saying that regardless of the circumstances, academic circumstances you find yourselves, um, whether you're an A-star student, always, getting the top grades and the highest grades, or whether or not you're an average student or not, not you haven't always gotten the best grades, regardless of the circumstances you find yourself academically. Let me impress upon you that your grades don't define who you are. If you're an A-star student, always getting high grades, that is really good and keep doing it, keep pushing, but don't get complacent. They don't define who you are. And secondly, if you haven't been in the habit of getting the best grades, I would say keep pushing, but also remember that they don't define who you are. The reason why I say that is that I want to impress upon you that in a few years' time, you could also be on the other side of the screen watching, having people watch you give advice on their career. Where I am today, 5, 6 years, ago, I wouldn't have thought I will be doing what I'm doing today. So this could be you 4, 5, 6 years from now. There's nothing special about me. There's nothing special about Sophia. There's nothing special about anyone. You can do the same thing too. So the next couple of minutes, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share some of the key lessons I've learned over the course of my career, and hopefully it will encourage you, and hopefully there will be things that you can learn and pinpoint from my career journey, and that you could also apply to your journey as well, as you carry on. The first thing I will note is that Sophia mentioned this already, but I can't stress this enough, that ultimately with getting into, whether it's the banking sector or the financial sector, whatever sector you find yourself trying to get into, the first thing is that you have to identify what you love, identify where your interests are. Um, the reason why I say that is that I currently work for a bank, but I didn't start out, looking at the finance and banking sector. Um, when I was in secondary school, I, identified that I had an interest in law, and I also had an interest in economics and finance. And so in secondary school, I immediately identified that I ultimately wanted a career that would merge both something from the legal sector and the financial sector. So I thought ultimately that that would, you know, I thought that would probably best work out being a lawyer. So I actually went on to do my undergrad in law. I actually studied law and my undergrad, and I started pursuing a career within as a lawyer. I had several work experiences, within the legal sector, and was actually growing my career. And ultimately, what I wanted to do was to bec- turn out, graduate, and turn out to be a lawyer specializing in financial crime. Remember, ultimately, I identified that I wanted a career that merged law as well as finance. And I thought actually, that would best work out, specializing as a financial crime lawyer. But while I was in uni doing my undergrad, I quickly identified that the grades, the ultimate grade that I was chasing after, wasn't good enough to, allow me to be a lawyer. By the way, I graduated with a 2-2. Um, and so I identify that actually the legal sector is very competitive. And so knowing fully well that I ultimately wanted to end up in a career that had a mix between law and finance, I then thought to myself, well, what is the next best career if being a lawyer wouldn't work out for me? And immediately I identified compliance. So today I work for BNY Mellon within their compliance department. And in my role, what I do is I basically advise the bank on keeping in line with the rules and regulations. So I'm fairly versed on, financial services law and any questions, any issues relating to the financial services regulations. My team essentially is the go-to team. And so in my day-to-day, I provide advice to, a huge bank on, financial services. Now, I also initially wanted to be a lawyer, but it wasn't working out with the grades I was looking at. So I thought to myself, what will be the next best career? And identifying compliance as the next best career was the best thing I ever did because I enjoy what I do today. So back to the first point I'm making is that the very first place you have to start out with is identifying what you want to do. So if you're looking at the banking and finance sector as an example, you want to identify, do you want to be an analyst? Do you want to be an accountant? Do you want to be an economist? Do you want to be a fund manager? Do you want to be a trader? All of those, there's several career paths within the financial and banking sector, and you want to identify what specific area do I want to specialize in? What specific area am I interested in? You want to identify that, and that would be the ultimate driver. So regardless of whether or not you're along the right track, or just like me, your grades put you down, you're able to fall back on the actual goal. The goal is what your interest is. The second point I would make is that you have to start researching. So it's one thing to identify, where your interest is and what you enjoy doing, but you don't just stop there. You have to research. So as an example, if I want to be an accountant, I want to identify what do accountants do? What is it about accountants that, stand them different? How can I start to build the skills of an accountant regardless of where I am today? And throughout my career, that was one thing that that stood me out. So in secondary school, as soon as I identified that I ultimately wanted to end up in a career that merged finance and law, I started researching other career paths. I started researching, so many the areas and of careers that merge finance and law. And so I was able to identify that or identify that I could get into compliance. And so you want to identify, you want to start by, you want to do research. The third thing I would mention is, and to be honest, this is the most important point, apart from finding out what you love, is that you want to spend some time doing work experience. Throughout my career, work experience has been the one thing that has stood me out ultimately throughout my career. Remember that, in secondary school, I quickly identified that I wanted to end up in a career that merged both law and finance. And so what I started doing from secondary school was that every single summer or half term from secondary school through to college and through to university, every single summer, I made sure that I spent time, looking for work experience, finding work experience, and doing work experience, approaching people for work experience for 1 week, for 2 weeks, sometimes for more than 2 weeks, and getting a feel for what they do, getting a feel for what people do within their career. Some of you may have already been applying for roles. I see some of you have graduated, some of you are finishing up your masters, and I'm sure that there'll be a few of you who will be in the middle of putting applications for a job. And one thing you would quickly identify is that it's not just enough to graduate with your degree. What companies also want to see is that the first thing they ask you is a CV, and when they ask you for your CV, they ask you for experience. And time and time again, graduates always have this question: how could I graduate and have several years of experience on my CV? How do you expect me to graduate and haven't spent so much time studying, but yet have all this time, all this work experience on my CV? But what I'll say is that what stands you out is in between studying that you're actually taking time to elevate yourself within your career, so seeking for work experience. And for a lot of you, that could mean as in the banking and finance sector, doing some research into the top banks or the major banks within the UK, as an example, looking at the career pages on their website, seeing what sort of summer placements they have, what sort of what entry levels of what their criteria for applying to a 3 months internship with them would mean. Some banks, as an example, offer spring-term placements or work experience, either for first year students or final year students, excuse me, or penultimate year students. And you want to identify, excuse me, you want to identify what placements they have in place and what you can apply to. But what I would say is that also the banks that do offer traditional placements, those placements tend to be very competitive. And so what you must do is also step outside the box. So as an example, throughout my career, I never once applied for an summer placement directly with a bank, but what I did was I identified people within those industries and I pursued them for work experience. So every summer I did work experience either within a bank or within a financial industry sector or a firm. And what I did was, I would, and I used social media. I used LinkedIn quite a lot. I identified people who were excelling within their career, either within the banking or finance sector, and I sent them messages asking for work experience, asking them if I can shadow their work for a week or 2 weeks. That is how you would, gain experience. And one thing that experience also does is it also helps you identify what you actually love or enjoy doing. Because when you experience doing something, then only then would you be able to identify what you actually enjoy doing, what you actually find pleasure doing. Um, and so never give up. You would hear a lot of no's when you chase after either companies or people. You would hear a lot of no's, but never give up. From experience, I once pursued someone for work experience for about a year. What I did in this particular scenario was that I identified him as someone who was excelling very well within the sector that I wanted. And so I added him on LinkedIn, and I immediately sent him a message and asked him if I could come into, have some work experience with him. He didn't respond to my LinkedIn message. And so I sent him an email. I sent him two emails over a period of 3 months, and he didn't respond to either emails. And so what I proceeded to do was I proceeded to add him on Facebook. Now, I'm not saying that you should go ahead and add everyone to Facebook, but I decided actually in this case I wanted to take a risk, and so I added this person to Facebook and I sent him a message on Facebook, and he finally responded. Bear in mind he responded in July, and he responded and said, actually I could come in to shadow his work for about a week in November. This was in July. So what I did from July up until November was that I emailed him and to sent him a reminder every month from July up until November. So in August, I sent him a message saying, remember, you promised me some work experience with you in November. In September, I sent the same message. In October, I sent a message again to say, remember, next month you promised me to, that I can come in to shadow your work. And then in November, the first day of November, I sent him a message again, and I said to him, well, it's November now. What day can I come in? And then he gave me a date. But that particular relationship I pursued for about a year before I could eventually get that work experience. But you know what? That experience, has done me well and served me well, because wherever whatever I've put in my CV and interviewed, since then, people look at that name, people look at the company I spend time with, and that, that's a shock to them. It's a surprise because, that it's such a thriving company that was on my CV. But that particular relationship I pursued for over a year. And so I'd say you would hear a lot of no's within your time, but don't let that deter you. Continue to press on. But I cannot stress enough the importance of work experience and work placements. And the final thing I will mention is that you need to build your network. Your network, and one of the best ways to build your network is that, remember at the beginning I mentioned that you have to identify, you have to start by doing research, and then you go on to get some work experience. When you do work experience, what I did, as I was, working my way up, and doing loads of work experiences, is that I kept, in touch with people. So wherever I did work experience, I made sure I stayed in touch with people. Not from a, and what I would advise you is don't approach it from a perspective of gaining something, but approach it from a perspective of service. So as an example, I will from time to time, as I did work experience, I would from time to time send messages, to the people I did work experience with, thanking them for, for allowing me the time to come in to shadow their work and the experience. From time to time, I'll send them emails, updating them on, my career journey or where I was in terms of my academics. From time to time, I would send them Christmas cards, just to wish them Merry Christmas. From time to time, I would, just give them a phone call, and just say, I just called to check up on you and make sure you're doing well. And so approach those relationships from a place of service. But that is one thing that has stood me well. And, I'll share this with you is that by investing in building my network and um, keeping in touch with people that I did work experience with, when I graduated from university and I immediately identified that I wanted to get into compliance, I had done work experience with someone 4 years prior. And because I'd kept in touch with them, they immediately identified that there was an opportunity within their company, a compliance opportunity, and they immediately put me forward for the opportunity. Now they were essentially helped me get my foot into the door, but I had to maintain and build that net relationship, build that network, and I did it over a 4 year period, to the point where 4 years later, after doing 2 weeks work experience, because I'd kept in touch with this person, they identified that there was an opportunity, and that was my foot into the door into the banking and finance sector. And so what I would say, and I'll stress this, is build your network, and build your network of people. It's very important. So to reiterate what the points I've made, the first thing is you have to identify what you enjoy doing, identify what you love. It's one thing to identify that you want to work within finance and the banking, but you have to identify what area of banking, what area of finance. The second thing is you have to research. Spend some time researching, what areas you want to get into, what it takes to get into them. Number three is you want to identify, and you want to invest in work experience and work placements. You want to identify, the banks and the financial companies that, have work experience and work placements. And outside of that, you also want to have the opportunity to be able to build your network. And the final thing I'll leave you with is things don't happen quickly, but they happen suddenly. Thank you.